Most people think power is found out there in the meetings, the cities, the noise, the crowds. But Machiavelli would smirk at that. Because what you think is doing something is often the fastest way to lose control. He understood something few ever do. The man who leaves his house to chase the world rarely returns with his soul intact. The one who stays, who isolates strategically, begins to see the world for what it is, not a stage to perform on, but a board to play upon. You've been told that staying home means stagnation, laziness, or fear. But that's because most people confuse stillness with weakness. Machiavelli knew stillness is how a predator watches before it strikes. It's how power collects itself before it expands. Staying home isn't retreat, it's consolidation. It's the quiet phase before the empire. When you step away from the world, you stop playing by its tempo. Society is a rhythm designed to keep you reactive. Work here, post that, show up there. Everyone's moving, but no one's arriving. When you stay home, when you willingly step outside that rhythm, you create a dangerous advantage. Time that belongs only to you. And time, not money, not connections, is the rarest currency of control. Every hour you spend in stillness sharpens your perception. You start noticing how shallow most people's convictions are, how predictable their desires. You begin to see the machine, not the mask, and once you see the machine, you can control it. Machiavelli would have said that a prince must understand his city as both a builder and an observer. A fool rushes to rule before he's learned the rhythm of his people. The wise ruler stays behind his walls, listening, learning, watching who brings news, who flatters, who schemes. Your home, your solitude, is your fortress. It's where you learn to interpret the whispers before they become wars. But only if you use it correctly. Most people use their home to escape reality. The Machiavellian uses it to dissect it. When you're surrounded by walls, distractions vanish, and the truth of your own mind begins to echo. And that's where real danger begins, because when you start hearing your own thoughts clearly, you realize how much of your life was built around noise. People think power is made in public, but the truth is, power is built in private and only displayed in public. The same way soldiers are trained behind closed doors before they march through the city. The most dangerous men are the ones nobody's seen in a while. The quiet one. The one who stopped showing up. Because in absence, mystery begins to grow. And mystery, in Machiavellian terms, is currency. It makes people talk, speculate, respect. When they can't predict you, they fear you. When they can't find you, they imagine you. Staying home feeds that silence. It lets people forget your weaknesses while their imagination builds your legend. But staying home isn't easy because it forces confrontation. Not with others, with yourself. The outside world gives you excuses to keep running. Conversations, errands, invitations, noise. At home, those excuses collapse. You're left with the mirror, and Machiavelli would have said that's where most people's courage ends. Because the mirror shows you your own lies, how you've been pretending to be moral, busy, loyal, useful, when in truth you've been afraid. And once you face that fear, once you learn to sit with it without flinching, you become dangerous. Because most people will do anything to avoid that confrontation. You, however, will have passed through it. That's why staying home is one of the most radical acts in a society addicted to exposure. They want you visible. They want you constantly expressing, proving, posting. Because visible people are predictable people. They reveal their emotions, their opinions, their weaknesses. The unseen, however, cannot be read, and therefore cannot be controlled. When you stay home, you deny the world access to your patterns. You move into what Machiavelli would call the fog of the unseen. Your silence becomes a weapon. Every message you don't reply to, every event you don't attend, every update you don't post, all of it sends one signal. I don't need you. And in the hierarchy of power, that's the loudest message of all. Of course, there's a difference between hiding and positioning. The Machiavellian doesn't vanish because he's weak. He vanishes because he's calculating. He withdraws not to disappear, but to create a vacuum, and nature hates vacuums. People will rush to fill the silence with their own interpretations. He must be working on something. He must know something we don't. He must be improving. Whether or not it's true doesn't matter. What matters is that perception begins to work for you without you lifting a finger. You've outsourced your power to imagination, theirs, not yours. And once people start imagining you as powerful, you don't have to prove it. You've already won half the game. Think about how every empire begins, not with expansion, but with walls. The Great Wall, the castles of Europe, the palaces of Florence. Each ruler first fortifies, observes, then acts. Machiavelli taught that control comes from containment. Contain your impulses, your environment, your interactions. Containment is power disguised as passivity. When you stay home, you practice containment. You begin to decide what gets in, who gets your time, what enters your mind, what energy surrounds you. The modern world has tricked people into thinking openness is virtue. Be available. Be reachable. No. Availability is vulnerability. Every door that's open can be walked through. A ruler closes his doors. A fool keeps them open in the name of kindness. Staying home also allows a man to perfect his narrative before he reveals it. In the public eye, mistakes are magnified. Every stumble becomes gossip. Every trial becomes entertainment. But behind closed doors, you can fail without witnesses. You can rehearse your authority before it's seen. Machiavelli believed appearance is everything, but appearance must be perfected privately. The home becomes your rehearsal hall, your war room. It's where you sharpen your words, discipline your habits, and plot your ascent without interruption. By the time you step outside again, your silence has already done the work. They see you not as someone returning, but as someone emerging. The irony is, the world will call you antisocial for it. They'll say you're missing out. But missing out is exactly what you should want, to miss the noise, the gossip, the chaos that steals your focus. While they trade their time for attention, you're trading your attention for mastery. And mastery, Machiavelli knew, is the only true source of respect. Staying home turns every hour into a negotiation with yourself. You start managing your own weaknesses like a ruler manages a court, identifying which impulses to trust, which to execute, which to exile. Most people are servants to their distractions. You, on the other hand, are learning to rule them. The world outside will always tempt you with movement, as if movement itself means progress. But motion without direction is just noise. Staying home helps you separate motion from meaning. You begin to act only when necessary, speak only when it serves purpose, and move only when the move is irreversible. That's how Machiavellian patience is built, through the art of withholding. Withholding your presence, your opinions, your reactions. Because once you learn to delay the urge to react, you gain command over those who can't. Every ruler must master restraint before dominance. Restraint is the seed of timing, and timing is everything. Eventually, your home becomes not a cage, but a citadel. While others use their rooms to scroll, you use yours to scheme. Every minute of quiet becomes a calculation. Every day of solitude strengthens your independence. You begin to realize how little you actually need, not because of minimalism, but because of control. Dependency weakens rulers. Detachment builds them, and nothing trains detachment better than stillness. Machiavelli's greatest advantage was his ability to think when others panicked, to observe when others reacted. That's what staying home gives you, the gift of detachment, the cold distance required to see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. It's almost comical. The same people who call you lazy for staying home are the ones burning out chasing validation. They don't realize you're building leverage in silence. They're spending their energy trying to be noticed. You're storing yours to strike when it matters. They think you've fallen behind, but Machiavelli would say you're ahead, because while they're busy playing the game, you're studying its rules. The world rewards visibility, but it obeys invisibility. The unseen architect designs the stage. The actor just performs on it. Staying home turns you from performer to designer. It takes you out of the show and places you behind the curtain, where the real control lives. And once you start to taste that control, you'll never crave attention again. Because attention feels fragile, control feels eternal. The difference between the two is where you spend your silence. Most people waste theirs scrolling, waiting, wishing. You'll spend yours refining, building, planning. You'll start to sense that the less you do outwardly, the more your presence grows inwardly. People will start noticing your absence, then your calmness, then your results. That's when they'll realize you weren't staying home because you were afraid of the world. You were staying home because the world was afraid of what you were becoming. When Machiavelli spoke of fortresses, he wasn't merely referring to walls of stone and iron. He was speaking of the kind built within the mind. Your home becomes that mental fortress. Every hour spent alone sharpens your intuition. You start noticing how fast others burn themselves out trying to stay relevant, how much energy they lose by reacting to every small disturbance. When you stay home long enough, you begin to realize how rare it is to meet someone who is truly centered. The world outside is full of people desperate to be seen. The world inside you is waiting for you to learn how to see yourself. Once you grasp that, the hunger for validation begins to dissolve, replaced by a quiet satisfaction that no applause can imitate. Isolation, when done right, doesn't make you weaker. It purifies you. It burns away the unnecessary. It strips you of the personas you've worn to survive public life. You start seeing the difference between who you are and who you pretend to be. And Machiavelli would tell you, the more masks a person wears, the easier they are to manipulate. But the one who knows his naked self, his impulses, his fears, his limits, cannot be easily moved. Staying home forces you into that confrontation, and through it, you earn something the outside world can never give: self-command. You start operating from your own center instead of the shifting winds of others' opinions. And from that center, every decision becomes sharper, every reaction more deliberate, every move calculated. Most people don't stay home because they fear irrelevance. They fear being forgotten. But Machiavelli would laugh at that fear because he knew irrelevance is not what kills power. Overexposure does. The more people see you, the less they value you. Familiarity makes you cheap. The king who walks the streets daily becomes just another man. The citizen who appears rarely becomes myth. When you're always present, people stop wondering about you. When you vanish, they start imagining. And in politics, in business, in life, imagination always carries more weight than reality. Staying home makes you scarce, and scarcity creates perceived value. People don't chase what's everywhere. They chase what's absent. It's ironic, isn't it? You withdraw and suddenly people reach out more. They sense the change, the quiet confidence. They can't explain it, but they feel it. You no longer look like someone begging for inclusion. You look like someone who chose exile. And there's something magnetic about choice. Power always belongs to the one who could leave but doesn't need to. By staying home, you flip the dynamic. You're no longer the one seeking approval. You're the one withholding presence. And humans crave what's withheld. This is why Machiavelli's princes would retreat to their chambers for days. Not because they had nothing to say, but because silence made every word heavier when finally spoken. You must learn to weaponize absence the same way. But to truly benefit from solitude, you have to discipline it. Staying home without direction is just comfort. Staying home with purpose is transformation. You have to treat your space as a laboratory, not a hiding place. Every day, refine a skill, challenge a thought, question a belief. Read not to escape, but to dissect. Write not to express, but to structure your mind. Practice thinking for yourself, not as a rebellion, but as a preparation. Because once you re-enter the world, you'll notice how little independent thought actually exists. People repeat, repost, recycle. You'll speak once, and it'll carry more weight than 1,000 of their words, because yours came from depth, not noise. There's also an unexpected power in not needing to be entertained. The more comfortable you become in stillness, the more control you gain over your emotions. When you no longer need stimulation, you become immune to manipulation. Machiavelli understood that those who can't sit in silence are easy to rule. Just keep them distracted. Give them bread and spectacle. But the man who can find peace in emptiness is untouchable. He doesn't seek escape. He creates meaning. Staying home teaches you this emotional sovereignty. You start realizing that boredom is not the enemy. It's the training ground for depth. Every moment you resist the urge to distract yourself, you strengthen your mind's ability to stay composed when the world tries to pull you apart. And make no mistake, the world will try. It rewards obedience disguised as participation. Be social, they say. Stay active. But what they mean is, stay visible enough for us to control you. Every system, political, economic, digital, depends on your constant involvement. The moment you disconnect, it loses power over you. That's why solitude feels dangerous to them. Because a person who can sit in silence can't be easily manipulated. They start asking forbidden questions. They stop reacting to propaganda. They notice how much of society runs on fear, not logic. Machiavelli's insight was simple but terrifyingly true. Rulers depend on distraction to maintain control. So when you stay home and cut the noise, you reclaim that control. You stop being ruled. There's another layer to it, one that Machiavelli would have admired most. When you stay home, you begin to see patterns others can't. People moving in herds, trends rising and falling, opinions shifting like tides. You realize how predictable the collective mind really is, and once you can predict it, you can use it. That's the true reward of observation, influence. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by quietly positioning yourself ahead of the curve. By the time everyone reacts, you've already moved. That's how the silent strategist always wins. He acts like a reckless, but he's 10 steps ahead. And let's not ignore this. Staying home sharpens your perception of power itself. You begin to notice how every social dynamic mirrors a court. Every friendship has hierarchy. Every group has a ruler. Every interaction is a subtle negotiation of dominance. When you're constantly surrounded by people, you're too absorbed to see it. When you pull back, you finally understand the game. You see who truly holds influence, who merely pretends, and how most people's confidence crumbles the moment they lose an audience. That knowledge makes you immune to charm and immune to intimidation, two of the strongest social weapons. Machiavelli would say that's when you're ready to lead, because only those who no longer need to impress can command respect. Staying home also allows you to reset your standards. The longer you spend away from chaos, the clearer you see what's worth your time. You stop tolerating mediocrity disguised as connection. You stop seeking approval from people whose opinions mean nothing. You start realizing that solitude isn't loneliness, it's filtration. Every day alone filters out another layer of nonsense. By the time you step back into the world, you'll find you no longer fit into most of it, and that's exactly the point. Power begins where conformity ends. The more you stay home, the more you separate from the herd's rhythm. The world might call that isolation, but Machiavelli would call it purification. Then comes the shift. You stop staying home to hide and start staying home to build. You notice the difference between silence and stagnation. Your ideas begin to take form. Your routines harden into rituals. You realize you can wake when you want, create what you want, train your body, read for hours, think deeply, plan months ahead, and no one can stop you. That's not laziness, that's sovereignty. The man who controls his time controls his destiny. And in a world where everyone's time is bought, borrowed, or stolen, owning your hours is the ultimate rebellion. The longer you stay home, the more invisible rules of life you start to see. Like how opportunity rarely knocks, it whispers, and only the still can hear it. Or how the person who reacts least usually holds the most leverage. You begin to sense energy instead of words, motives instead of messages. That's when staying home stops being a tactic and becomes a way of seeing. You no longer need constant input to feel alive. You generate your own rhythm, your own meaning, your own direction. That's when you reach what Machiavelli might have called internal monarchy, when you rule yourself as if you were your own state. But here's the paradox that separates those who rise from those who fade in solitude. Most people retreat and never return. They mistake withdrawal for escape. The Machiavellian retreats to sharpen his blade, not to bury it. Your time at home isn't the end, it's preparation for the next strike. Like the general who studies maps before the war, your stillness is gathering precision. Because once you re-emerge, the world won't recognize you. You'll move slower, speak less, command more. And the same people who called you lazy for staying home will now call you mysterious, disciplined, focused. They'll think something changed while you were away. They'll be right, but they'll never know what. The hardest truth about staying home is that eventually the silence stops feeling peaceful. It starts feeling heavy. You begin to wonder if you're being left behind. You look at the lives flashing by your screen, everyone's smiling, moving, winning, and you question your stillness. But that's the final test of solitude, whether you can stand still while the world runs in circles. Machiavelli understood this kind of endurance. He knew that every ruler must be willing to be misunderstood in the short term to be respected in the long term. Power is never built in public consensus. It's built in private conviction. Staying home is how you prove to yourself that you can endure isolation without losing identity. The modern world has made addiction look like ambition. People brag about being busy. They equate exhaustion with importance, but what they call progress is often just panic with a schedule. When you stay home, you start seeing through this illusion. You realize that most of what others chase, status, validation, applause, is nothing more than distraction in disguise. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You stop wanting to compete in their race because you recognize it's not even heading anywhere. You begin to play your own game, with your own rules, on your own timeline. That's the essence of Machiavellian strength. Not rebellion against others, but mastery over yourself. But solitude has layers. The first layer is comfort. You enjoy the quiet. The second is discomfort. You start confronting your thoughts. The third is power, when you realize your thoughts no longer control you. Most people never make it to the third. They escape the discomfort by rushing back into noise. They need the world to drown out their own mind. But if you stay long enough, you begin to notice something strange. Your emotions become tools instead of triggers. Anger becomes energy. Sadness becomes reflection. Fear becomes data. You stop being a passenger to your psychology and start becoming its driver. That's when solitude becomes strength, when it gives you emotional precision. Machiavelli would call this the art of internal governance. Before a ruler can govern a state, he must govern himself. He must know when to act, when to wait, when to appear generous, when to conceal ruthlessness. These aren't instincts, they're learned disciplines. And the only place you can truly learn them is in stillness. Because when you're surrounded by people, you adapt to their tempo. When you're alone, you start creating your own. You begin to move according to strategy instead of impulse. Staying home becomes your political education. Every emotion becomes a counselor. Every silence becomes a meeting. Every decision becomes a decree over your own empire, the empire of one. There's a beauty to invisibility that people rarely talk about. When you're unseen, you're unmeasured. When you're unmeasured, you're unpredictable. And when you're unpredictable, you're free. Most people fear obscurity because they rely on the gaze of others to feel alive. But obscurity, when used correctly, becomes armor. It allows you to experiment, to fail, to rebuild without consequence. No one is watching, so nothing can be weaponized against you. You become a ghost, not dead but untouchable. And Machiavelli would tell you there's no form of power greater than that. To influence from the shadows, to act unseen but felt. Still, don't confuse invisibility with disappearance. The difference lies in intention. Disappearance is defeat. Invisibility is design. The Machiavellian knows when to emerge, not when he's ready, but when the timing serves him. Timing, after all, is the invisible thread that holds all strategy together. And staying home gives you that sensitivity to timing. You start feeling when the moment is ripe to strike. You learn to let opportunities mature instead of forcing them. The impulsive man acts. The strategic man waits. And in that waiting, you discover a truth most people never learn. That patience is not the absence of action, it's the preparation of precision. But let's speak plainly, staying home won't always feel powerful. There will be mornings you wake up questioning your purpose, days when silence feels suffocating, nights when you crave noise just to feel alive again. That's normal. Every strong person walks through that valley. Machiavelli himself was exiled from Florence, stripped of his title, humiliated publicly. But it was in that exile, in isolation, that he wrote The Prince, the very text that immortalized him. If he hadn't been forced into stillness, the world might have forgotten his name. Your own solitude is no different. What feels like exile might just be the season where you create something that lasts longer than the people who doubted you. The real purpose of staying home isn't to isolate from the world, it's to insulate yourself from its illusions, to filter what deserves your attention and what doesn't. Every time you say no to an invitation, you're saying yes to your evolution. Every time you choose focus over fun, you're declaring independence from the collective trance. And here's the twist. Once you develop that discipline, you can go anywhere, do anything, and never lose yourself again. Because you'll carry your stillness with you. The fortress will no longer be made of walls. It'll be built inside your mind. Eventually, you'll start to notice something powerful happening. Your conversations become quieter but sharper. Your presence grows heavier. People sense something in you. They can't name it, but they feel it. It's the calm of someone who doesn't need approval, the poise of someone who's not chasing anything, the steadiness of someone who's built an inner world no one can shake. Machiavelli said men should either be treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for slight injuries. For heavy ones they cannot. Apply that to your own life. When you stay home and build yourself, you stop reacting to slight injuries. You become too composed to be provoked, too focused to be flattered. That's the ultimate revenge. Indifference. Because the moment you no longer need validation, you become ungovernable. The world runs on control, social, emotional, financial. But all control depends on one thing, your reaction. The one who reacts least rules most. When you stay home long enough to master your reactions, you break free from every invisible chain society tries to wrap around you. You stop being a pawn on someone else's board and start becoming the player. Every quiet day in your room is a move no one sees coming. Every moment of stillness is a storm being planned. That's what staying home really is, the art of becoming untouchable through preparation. You're not missing out, you're setting up. You're not hiding, you're gathering power. While the world exhausts itself chasing noise, you're becoming the kind of person they'll eventually chase to understand the silence. And when you finally decide to step out, not to join them, but to lead, they'll realize something Machiavelli always knew. The man who can rule himself doesn't need a throne. He already owns the world.